Newfoundland's eastern Atlantic coastline. Hundreds of kilometers of winding rocky perimeter. The marine gateway to North America. From the steep cliff faces of the Avalon Peninsula to the unique heritage of France's Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. The coastlines here have it all. A seaside lookout point in historic St. John's that would help determine the future of this region.
In 1762, the Battle of Signal Hill took place here on our site, and it was actually the last battle of the 7 Years' War fought in North America.
A harsh offshore legacy on the easternmost point of North America.
You have a combination of pack ice and bad weather and fog. And also this is the location of the major oil fields, so it presents a very unique challenge.
And the last piece of France's New World Empire, thriving centuries later.
I think that when you live in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, you're halfway between Canada and France. You are influenced by Canada because we're surrounded by Canada, of course.
Now, we explore this rugged coastline like never before. A bird's eye view, unlocking the secrets of our maritime past, present, and future. This is Canada, Over the Edge. Heading south over the waters of Newfoundland's Conception Bay, the shores of the Avalon Peninsula sit on the horizon. Here, formidable Cape St. Francis marks the entrance to this 10,000 square kilometer peninsula, home to more than half of Newfoundland's island residents. "25 kilometers to the southeast, the city of St. John's lies below. First settled year-round in the early 1600s, it is the oldest English-founded city in North America. For centuries, St. John's survived on a successful fishery. Despite a collapse of the industry in the 1990s, St. John's connection to the sea carries on with a fishing fleet, industrial port, and booming offshore oil operations. Home to nearly 200,000 people, St. John's is the cultural hub of the island and the East Coast's second largest city. And overlooking this outpost is one of Canada's best-known coastal landmarks, Signal Hill, part of St. John's military legacy, key to the formation and survival of the city.
We're at Signal Hill National Historic Site on the edge of the Narrows at St. John's Harbour in St. John's, Newfoundland. So we're standing right on the edge of the cliff, and behind me you'll see the Narrows of St. John's and the Atlantic Ocean. So pretty much next stop is Ireland.
Robin Martin is an interpreter at this remote lookout, 500 feet above water, the city's connection to the sea.
Signal Hill, its name itself implies its connection to the communications history. And before it was called Signal Hill, it was called Flagstaff Hill, and it was used for both military and also civilian communication. So because of the high promontory of the land, they'd be able to observe all shipping going in and coming out. And when they saw a ship on the horizon coming in, they'd be able, with a telescope, to identify through flags who owned the vessel, and then they would send flags up to notify the companies down on the wharf that their vessel was coming in, so they prepare for it to be unloaded. Because we're about 500 feet above sea level, right above the Narrows here, you get about 250-degree angle of the panoramic view of the ocean, so you'd be able to see an enemy force long before they actually were a threat to the colony.
And it was off this sheltered harbor that one of the 18th century's key naval battles took place.
In 1762, the Battle of Signal Hill took place here on our site, and it was actually the last battle of the 7 Years' War fought in North America, and it kind of was the period at the end of the sentence for that conflict, which pretty much determined whether or not England or France was going to control North America. The battle took place in September of that year, right on the ground of our site, and basically the French had captured St. John's throughout the summer months. The British recaptured through an attack, and after that point, the treaty that ended the war was signed soon afterwards, and the British basically controlled North America.
But Signal Hill's best-known legacy is its role in Guglielmo Marconi's telegraph experiments of 1901.
He believed he could send a wireless signal across the Atlantic Ocean. Up to that point, all communications across the Atlantic were done with cables. Because of our proximity to Ireland, he chose to set up his receiving station here at an old hospital, an abandoned hospital here on Signal Hill. And a message was sent across from the United Kingdom, was received here in 1901.
Today, the Cabot Tower adorns the top of the hill. Built for Queen Victoria's Jubilee, the tower and the hill remain the centerpiece of St. John's. For Robin Martin, it's not just a meeting point for tourists, but also for locals who continue to be drawn here.
The tower itself has become an icon for all Newfoundlanders, I believe, and it's become a symbol of Newfoundland. And I think that it's become an inexorable part of the tapestry of the culture of Newfoundland. And we have the vast majority of our visitors here that come are Newfoundlanders. They come every day. We have people that come and drink their coffee and read the newspaper here in February, the deepest part of our winter. We have people that walk our trail systems every day in the summer, in the spring, and the fall. So it's become an integral part of the day-to-day life of Newfoundlanders, certainly certain people living in St. John's and the greater St. John's area.
From the city of St. John's, heading south, the Avalon Peninsula returns to a barren, forgotten wonder. Here on the harsh Atlantic coast of Newfoundland. And just east of the city of St. John's, a rocky stretch of shoreline marks the eastern extremity of Avalon. It is Cape Spear. And at just over 52 degrees longitude, it is also the easternmost point in North America. First named Cabo de Esperanza, or Cape of Hope, by the Portuguese, then Cap de Soir by the French, Cape Spear boasts the oldest surviving lighthouse in Newfoundland and Labrador. It is a unique square-shaped structure built in 1836, staffed and operated for more than a century. In 1955, the light was moved to this nearby automated replacement station. South of Cape Spear, the town of Petty Harbor, Maddox Cove, is one of the oldest European settlements in North America. A fishing hub since 1598, it was established more than 20 years before the Mayflower brought America's pilgrims across the Atlantic. And the town marks the beginning of a unique 250-kilometer stretch of coastline known as the Irish Loop, named in honor of centuries of Irish immigration here. Further, a return to nature along the sharp cliff faces of the eastern Avalon Peninsula. Here, uniquely named towns and inlets line the coast. From Bread and Cheese and Witless Bay to Devil's Kitchen. These granite rock faces have been carved over millions of years by the dangerous currents and tides, leaving incredible geological wonders in their wake. Next, this secluded lighthouse marks a return to civilization at the historic town of Ferryland. First settled by royal charter in 1621 by Lord Baltimore, the settlement would quickly prosper, home to more than 100 permanent residents just 4 years later. With that success, England's King James I would grant Lord Baltimore the Charter of Avalon, giving him authority in the region. And with that authority, Lord Baltimore and Fairyland would make history. On a 1627 voyage, Baltimore would establish freedom of religion in British North America, bringing 2 Roman Catholic priests to the settlement, allowing the many Irish immigrants in the region to freely practice Catholicism for the first time. It is a policy Baltimore would later include in the Charter of Maryland, bringing his vision of freedom of religion to what would become America. But in 1696, Fairyland would be destroyed by the French in a conflict known as the Avalon Peninsula Campaign. Centuries later, archaeological teams search for clues to the secrets of this historic settlement. From high above the island of Newfoundland, the eastern Avalon Peninsula represents just a fraction of this island's 10,000 kilometers of coast. Now, we begin a journey west along the incredible contours of this peninsula and beyond. This is Cape Race. Located at the southeast corner of the Avalon Peninsula, the Cape holds a crucial place in Newfoundland history. In 1904, just a few years after Marconi received the first transatlantic wireless signal at Signal Hill, Newfoundland's first Marconi wireless station was built here. For decades, Cape Race was North America's connection to the world, with New York's Associated Press maintaining an office here, paying steamship companies to bring the latest news in watertight containers, dropping them overboard for immediate transmission to all points west. But Cape Race's most famous transmission would be received April 14, 1912. "We require immediate assistance. Have struck iceberg and sinking," was the tragic message from the newly launched RMS Titanic. For nearly 4 days, Cape Race wireless operators worked here around the clock on rescue efforts and sharing Titanic's story with the world. And the Cape Race coastline is no stranger to tragedy at sea. With rocky, jagged cliffs shrouded in fog more than 150 days a year. It is a maritime legacy one Newfoundland institution is trying to change, improving working conditions for seafarers offshore. It is a multi-million-dollar simulation center, inspired by another of this region's great marine disasters,
The Center for Marine Simulation started in its present form in 1995, and it was a result of the offshore industry's funding of safety-enabling facilities, primarily to assist them in ensuring safety and efficiency in operations. There is a tie back to the Ocean Ranger. The Ocean Ranger was a semi-submersible drilling unit that sank in a huge storm in the Newfoundland offshore in the very early 80s. And it was both a systemic error and a design error that resulted in loss of the unit. The entire complement of 84 people were lost. So out of that came the ballast control simulator, which really was the founding part of the center. And it expanded into the facility we have now, which is the largest simulation facility for marine operations in Canada.
Chris Hearn is director of the Marine Simulation Center at St. John's Memorial University. A former navigator himself, he knows the challenges of Newfoundland's offshore.
By geography, Newfoundland is blessed and cursed with some interesting weather. It's primarily influenced by two major currents that meet offshore here on the Grand Banks. The Labrador Current, which comes down, brings ice with it, both glacial ice and pack ice from up off Greenland. And it meets with the Gulf Stream coming up north from down south with warm water. And they intersect on the Grand Banks. So you have a combination of pack ice and bad weather and fog. And also this is the location of the major oil fields. So it presents a very unique challenge.
In the years to come, Hearn believes this facility will be key in protecting Newfoundland's navigators of the future.
We're on a ship's bridge, an entire ship's bridge, very compact, that's sitting on top of a 6-degree motion platform that allows the models to move as a real ship will move given the external forces, wind, wave, current, impacts. And it's a 360-degree screen that surrounds the entire bridge. And we're sitting on an offshore supply vessel, very similar to the ones that will be servicing the fields off Newfoundland. And we're just on the field near the Hibernia platform. Some of the production units are just over there on the other side, on our starboard side. We have 10 projectors. They're sitting up over the top of the unit itself, and they're projecting out onto the screen. The screen has a particular curvature, more pronounced at the bottom, and that's to give you, to make sure you don't lose depth perception while the vessel is moving around. We want to convince people they're actually here. I mean, the main focus is to make things as realistic as possible, because this is where you allow accidents or you know, you let things play out that you can't or you wouldn't in the real world simply because of the cost or the risk. That's the value of a facility like this.
And the facility allows Hearn and his team to investigate all types of marine tragedy, including new studies on multiple aspects of the Titanic disaster.
One of them is the time delay. When they identified the iceberg, saw it, when they started to make their turn, what would have happened had they been going slower? We actually built the Titanic, which we're standing on now, and we ran it through several exercises at different speeds trying to figure out would they have avoided the iceberg had they been going slower. Out of the runs we did miss the iceberg a couple of times. However, you have to bear in mind that we couldn't model exactly what the piece of ice looked like, how large it was. And there seems to be a lot of conjecture around exactly what that was. But in our estimation, had the vessel probably been going slower, things would have gone a little bit different, I think. The sinking of the Titanic resulted in the SOLAS regulations, Safety of Life at Sea. It was the first international marine treaty. It started the international regulatory process. This institution is a result of those kinds of regulations and that kind of a loss. The Titanic is a story because it lies, you know, several hundred miles off the coastline here. For a very long time, bits and pieces were washing ashore here. And I guess it really was always something that everybody knew about. The Titanic sank off the coastline, hit an iceberg here. Ice has always been an issue here. I guess it relates on a lot of levels.
further west, this is the Mistaken Point Ecological Reserve is one of Newfoundland and Labrador's geological gems. The only place on Earth where 565-million-year-old seafloor is exposed and accurately preserved. Protected by layers of volcanic ash, this coastline reveals organisms that once lived at the bottom of a deep ocean, locked in complete darkness. They are the oldest complex life forms on Earth, with more than 30 ancient species, most now extinct, unknown to our modern world. Next, the scenic village of Portugal Cove South. Home to just over 200 people, the village was settled by the Portuguese in the 1600s, part of Newfoundland's long-standing connection with Portugal and Europe.
When the early explorers started coming to the New World, they realized that we had really abundant fish supplies here. John Cabot, for example, came and said that there were so many fish jumping out of the water that they were jumping in his ship, and he didn't need to catch them even. So he went back with this news saying, there's all kinds of food over there, let's go over. And so that's, I guess, how people first started coming to Newfoundland, just to catch the fish.
It is a unique connection that goes beyond fishing. During the Napoleonic Wars with France, England was forced to acquire its wine from nearby Portugal. Through an act of God, Newfoundland became the aging facility for Portugal's national drink, imported to England by the Newman family.
The Newman family had already established fishing premises here in Newfoundland, and the story goes that one of their ships in Portugal was bringing port back to England when it was thrown off course by pirates and bad weather. And the ship found itself escaping pirates in the middle of the ocean and not knowing what to do. So they knew that the Newmans had a plantation here, and they escaped and came to Newfoundland.
On returning to the Old World, European drinkers were surprised by Newfoundland's contribution to the drink.
When winter was over, they went back to England with their shipment, and they realized that the port had acquired a finer, smoother taste, and they thought this was very interesting. Of course, Portuguese wine was more of a patriotic wine because it wasn't French. And so the English thought it would be a great idea to come back and establish a trade of wine in exchange for fish.
Port continued to be aged in Newfoundland for centuries, stored in the hills of St. John's. In 1996, rising costs forced the operation to return home to Portugal. Now, these vaults stand as a memory to that legacy, a unique connection between England, Portugal, and the New World.
Inside here is the Newman wine vaults. We think that they were built in the very early 1800s, possibly as a British magazine. The barrels would have been from end to end and probably top to bottom. They filled the rooms. And workers who worked in here had to keep ventilation systems going, not only just for the goodness of aging port, but because the fumes were very, very strong, and they often went home inebriated.
From the easternmost point of North America, to the oldest life forms on Earth, The island of Newfoundland is a wealth of mystery. Now, we continue west along this final stretch of the scenic Avalon Peninsula. Following the path of the Atlantic inlet known as Southwest Arm, the towns of Placentia and Argentia slowly come into view. Home to just under 4,000 people, this region holds one of the richest military legacies on the island. Settled centuries ago, Placentia was the capital of France's empire here. Today, high above the town, Castle Hill National Historic Site marks the ruins of their military establishment, the launching point for the Avalon Peninsula Campaign, attacking nearby settlements like Ferryland and more than 20 other coastal English outposts. And just miles away, this barren headland is the site of the former U.S. naval station, Argentia. Originally a thriving village, Newfoundland, still part of the British Empire, would see Argentia razed to the ground at the onset of World War II under a land lease agreement between Britain and the U.S. Houses and buildings were demolished. Even bodies from local cemeteries were exhumed and relocated to grave sites in nearby Placentia. The base would be a key part of the transatlantic supply line, connecting North America with England. After World War II, Argentia would be key in detecting foreign spy ships along the coast. But with the decline of offshore activity at the end of the Cold War, the base was decommissioned in 1994. Ten kilometers to the northwest lies the former settlement of Red Island. A fishing hub, Red Island was one of 300 Newfoundland and Labrador communities forced to relocate between 1954 and 1975. Communities deemed to have no great future. The goal was to ensure services were being provided to all residents and to modernize the fishing industry with centralized processing plants, trawlers, and new harbor facilities. It was one of the most controversial policies in the history of the province, affecting more than 28,000 people. Heading west, we approach Newfoundland's other incredible coastline. The Burin Peninsula. It is a landscape unlike any other, with lush green rolling hills, spectacular sandbars, and thousands of tiny hidden coastal inlets. Centuries ago, this shoreline was a haven for the British explorer and navigator Captain James Cook. As he mapped the islands and recorded safe anchorages for future explorers. And from these hilltops, Cook would survey for illegal French fishing ships and privateers. On the eastern end of the Burin Peninsula, the settlement of Marystown is home to a quarter of the peninsula's residents. It is a shipbuilding and fishing town, set in a region still recovering from the cod moratorium of the 1990s. Built on the shores of Mortier Bay, Marystown holds a strategic position in Newfoundland and Labrador. With one of the largest ice-free harbors in North America. During World War II, Marystown and Mortier Bay were chosen as the evacuation point for the British royal family and the regrouping point for the British Navy in the event of a German attack on Britain. Heading cross-country, the town of Fortune marks the western limits of the Burin Peninsula and the beginning of a unique coastal journey. Just miles from shore, remote Green Island marks the limits of Canada's political boundary, and we enter the Sovereign Republic of France. Covering 242 square kilometers, this is Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, a collection of 8 French islands just off the coast of Fortune, Newfoundland. These islands have been fought over for centuries by the English and French. With the Treaty of Paris in 1814, they have remained in French hands for nearly 2 centuries. The last vestige of France's New World Empire, it is a unique experience off Canada's east coast.
Here we are on French territory. We have euros and we are French citizens. Like the 14th of July, the Bastille Day, our national day, and of course French flags everywhere, and the fact that everything closes at noon. We go home, we eat, we take time, and then go back to work at 1:30 or 2. So it's really the French way of life.
Like much of eastern Canada, France's presence here is due to the historic fishery along these coastlines. Lauriane de Cheverie is a historian with a local museum here.
The reason why we are still French here is simply it's really cod. Just because French fishermen wanted to go on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland to fish cod, and they needed a land base. So they quickly found that Saint-Pierre-and-Miquelon was close to the Grand Banks, and that there was this natural harbor in Saint-Pierre that really gave its value to the island here. So they chose to come here to have a land base to be able to dry cod on what we call in French graves, which are like stone fields, flakes. That's really why France fought with England to keep the islands, because cod was very important for the country at this time.
Home to just over 5,000 residents, the town of Saint-Pierre is the administrative and cultural center here. With French restaurants and cobblestone streets, it is a piece of Europe in Canada's backyard. Further north, the less populated island of Miquelon stretches more than 25 kilometers, with the tiny town of Miquelon connected by the island's incredible sandbar.
We also have the island of Miquelon-Langlade. So we have a small town on Miquelon, and Langlade is a very wild place. People of Saint-Pierre like to go to Langlade and Miquelon during summer months just to spend their holidays there. Between Miquelon and Langlade, we have an isthmus of sand that we call La Dune in French. And the story says that the isthmus of sand was created thanks to all the shipwrecks that happened just there. So we have legends about ghosts and shipwrecks on this isthmus of sand.
With its unique story, Saint-Pierre has enjoyed an incredible history. From the early battles of the 18th century to a rum-running tradition born out of the Prohibition era, when Al Capone was said to have visited the island. Gilles Borotra is a local resident.
Saint-Pierre became the warehouse of the liquor suppliers from all over the world, I guess, nearly, and the European and Scottish people as well. So I believe at the most, on the biggest years, 1 million cases of liquor were landing here a week and being sent to the east coast of the United States, you know. Saint-Pierre being near the south coast of Newfoundland, so a real tradition of supplying cheap liquor and cheap tobacco to our neighbors has been kept for ever since the Prohibition has disappeared. And it has not, there's nothing comparable to the amount of liquor and tobacco that were sold to the States and Canada. Still, it has been there for ever since the 20s, and I guess a couple of families have been able to keep that kind of business. You know, it's nearly disappeared today, though.
Decades later, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon would even play a memorable role in World War II.
Saint-Pierre and Miquelon is in fact the first French territory that has been freed by the free-fighting Frenches with the General de Gaulle. In fact, we had the Vichy government here at the beginning of the war, but on the 14th December 1941, the free-fighting Frenches came here, took the power, and Saint-Pierre became a kind of military base for them, and that's how people of Saint-Pierre went to the war. They engaged themselves, they were volunteers in the free-fighting Frenches.
Far from home, the traditions of Old World France carry on here, particularly those of the first Basque settlers.
Compared with the les Bretons and the Normandy people, only the Basque have really kept traditions on the island, from the dance to the sports.
In the heart of downtown Saint-Pierre, one of the most recognizable features is a large orange wall, used today for traditional Basque sports.
That's originated from les Basques, who came from le Pays Basque in the, I guess, the mid-1800s, like my grandfather did actually. And they've built that wall nearly 100 years ago. This wall is a representation of what is left from those real traditions. You have, I believe, 3 major games, the La Paleta, La Palancha, and the bare hands, which has nearly disappeared today. You play a hard ball with your hand, so your hand can become like twice as big after an hour or so playing that game.
More than 3 centuries after the first settlers arrived, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon continues a unique European tradition. For Lauriane Decheverie, life here reflects the unique island geography.
I think that when you live in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, you're halfway between Canada and France. You're French because you're a French citizen, you have euros, you vote for the French president and everything like the rest of people in France, but in a cultural way, you are influenced by Canada because we're surrounded by Canada, of course, and if we want to go to France, we have to go through Canada first. Some people say that they feel closer to Canada sometimes. Others say that they feel closer to France. But it's different. When you're in France, you feel your Canadian influence, and when you're in Canada, of course, you feel your French influence. So I would say that we're really half the way between those 2 countries.
From the Avalon Peninsula to the Burin Peninsula, to Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. This eastern coastline is a mix of modern cities, spectacular landscape, and traditional ways of life. It is Canada, Newfoundland, and France all in one. Here on the edge of Canada.